Well, JABABEKA always wants to help government in fighting investors to come to Indonesia. As you know, when you made that first brochure for us.
Yeah.
How can we help more investors to come to Indonesia?
Yeah, I mean, I think Indonesia in a way is quite a low-profile country for the size of the economy, the size of the population. People don't necessarily know a lot about the Indonesian economy, so I think sort of promotion globally would help.
We have more than 17,000 islands in Indonesia.
Yeah.
If we have to build airports in every island, there's some big jobs, right?
That's one of the benefits of seaplanes. You don't need much infrastructure. You need a dock like you need a dock for a boat, basically.
Right. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Pak Darmono.
So how have you been doing?
Good, thanks. Yeah, man. Good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. So it has been more than 30 years since I think we met first time.
Yeah.
So I remember in 1989 you came here as an intern. You were still a student, and then JABABEKA was just beginning with our project.
Yeah, it was early days.
You remember where our office was?
Yeah, I remember the office was in Wisma Nusantara. Yeah, it was Plaza Indonesia. I think it just opened.
Yes, that's right.
So yeah, it was.
Yeah, so it's a real pleasure to have you here.
Yeah.
And I hope this meeting or discussion can be useful as part of the JABABEKA history.
Right.
And to tell our colleagues, our friends, how, from your perspective, see the development of JABABEKA.
It's come a long way.
Yes. Perhaps you could tell us more about yourself, Mike.
Yeah, sure. I'm from Vancouver, Canada, and as Pak Darmono mentioned, came out as an intern when I was still doing my university studies, and Pak Darmono was very kind to give me an internship at JABABEKA, working with the company in the first year or two, right? So,
Yes.
Yeah, it was a new company, very exciting, lots happening. Chikarang was quite empty at the time. There's a few factories, but still quite early days. Then I went back and finished my studies. I came back to Indonesia in 1993, I guess, and lived here for 6 years or so, working as a management consultant. And then I left and went to business school, went to INSEAD in France. And then from there, I was in Indonesia and eventually returned to Canada, worked there for a while, worked on international trade and investment and development, worked on projects in China and India and Southeast Asia. And then recently moved back towards Singapore, and then I've come to Indonesia in the last year or so.
Very good. So you must be able to tell a lot of story about how Indonesia progressed.
Yeah, a lot of changes over 30. I guess I first visited Indonesia in about 1986, so almost as a tourist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but so certainly over the years seen a lot of changes. Yeah, definitely. It's amazing how much the infrastructure's developed, how much bigger the city's gotten. Right? Certainly, JABABEKA has become a huge city. And the business that's come up here is amazing. I mean, remember when I was working at JABABEKA, restaurants to go out to kind of Western-oriented restaurants, there weren't too many at that time. Now there's thousands, right, in Jakarta. So.
Well, JABABEKA always wants to help government in fighting investors to come to Indonesia, as you know, when you made that first brochure for us.
Yeah.
So how to make it easy for investors to come, because it's always difficult for foreigners to understand about how large Indonesia is and how complicated actually the culture, there may be also getting permit and understanding how to buy land, how to build factories, all the infrastructure and so on.
Yeah.
And so this is why I'm curious to know, with your experience for the last 30 years, How can we help more investors to come to Indonesia? Of course, we have made a lot of progress, but still we are having difficulties also to compete with other countries, especially with China, Vietnam, who are also very, very competitive in their offering. So how do you see that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think Indonesia, in a way, is quite a low-profile country for the size of the economy, the size of the population. So in that sense, I think Indonesia needs to get out and help make itself more well-known. I think that's the thing. Sometimes Indonesia gets a bit overlooked by foreign investors, and now it's becoming one of the top 10 economies in the world, right? So people don't necessarily know a lot about the Indonesian economy, so I think sort of promotion globally would help. And other than that, helping people to understand the opportunities here, because Indonesia's grown so much. The middle class has exploded, right, from a very small base to a big size. So I think those are some of the things that would help with foreign investors.
So you are in consulting business too, right? Management consultant before.
Yeah, before. Yeah.
Then what did you give consultancy to your friends who want to invest in Indonesia? Like how to do business in Indonesia?
Yeah, it was a bit about that. It focused more on management, so it was about how to kind of integrate international management and local management practices to get the best results. It's a bit like that. So, and there's a good opportunity for that. There's certain international managers practices which can be applied fairly easily here. And then others that need to be adapted for the local context, the environment, the government, whatever the local context is to be more effective.
Yes. Well, our law, of course, here is not as strong as the developed countries yet. A lot of business still based on connection, relationship. Why do you think it is like that?
Why is it like that? That's a good question. I mean, I think that's the way business has probably been traditionally throughout time. So in a way, it's a little bit of modernization, I suppose. Rule of law is not necessarily, I think something actually comes naturally to people. But I think because it is more efficient, it allows people to do deals and do business with people they don't really know. In the past, you kind of traditionally needed to do business with people you know, so you could get that level of trust. So I guess the idea with the law is that it helps to extend that trust to people you don't know through contracts, through courts, things like that, to ensure that things are done as agreed.
Good. Do you also give advice, for example, better to have settlement out of the court rather than in court? Is that also something normal in the US, or is particularly more so in countries like Indonesia, China, in South Asia perhaps, not including Singapore?
Right. It certainly happens in the West. You see the high-profile case a couple of weeks ago, Dominion with Fox News, right? So it was actually one of my fellow alumni from business school who was the CEO of Dominion. But, they settled that out of court. So, but I think it's more common in Indonesia. I think you're right.
More common because we don't trust the judge or the the prosecutor or the defender or whatever.
Yeah, no, and that happens everywhere to varying degrees, right? I mean, not always. You're always going to court always introduces an element of uncertainty, right? So businesses don't like uncertainty.
Yeah. So you don't think that this actually is a big problem to invest in Indonesia, right?
No, I think Indonesia's come a long ways, right?
Yeah.
The days when we first joined JABABEKA Indonesia was very new to even some of the biggest companies now. So now I think it's become easier in many ways, and it's just come a long way.
Yeah, because the way I see Singapore in attracting investors is by selling certainty of law, and conveniences and safety, right?
Yeah.
So that is what also JABABEKA has been trying to do. We developed cluster like in Cikarang, where we also help to give the assurance. There is certainty of law. We don't change the regulation at all. Normally people say, you change the regulation too often, then it's very difficult for us to make business plan, right?
Yeah.
And also security-wise, changes of governments and so on, right? While we in industrial estate, of course, we stay there. We don't change the executive very often, and normally the shareholders remain the same shareholders who are
right. You're acting kind of as a local landlord and kind of like a local government to some extent.
Yes, give protection to our tenants, right?
Yeah,
to our investors.
Yeah, and that's very valuable, right?
So this is why we want also to develop more industrial estates, special economic zones. This is to give assurance also to investors to come to Indonesia, right? But in the last 30 years, do you also see that actually it is still a problem to come to Indonesia with clear, confidence? Or now in Indonesia, the certainty of law is much better, the security is much better, also a lot of infrastructure which provide conveniences. How do you see that?
I mean, I think Indonesia's come a long ways, right? And when I first came back in 1993, I lived in Menteng in Jalan Cendana. So I got a chance to see the existing government then, that kind of thing. So I think since then, Indonesia's modernized a lot. But there's still more to do. I think if you look at some of the international surveys of executives, enforcing contracts, securing payment, and kind of rule of law are still three areas that we focus on.
Okay, now changing the subject, in the last 6 years, you've been in airline business, right? Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, sure. We have a aircraft technology we've developed in Canada called FuelBox. And FuelBox is a modification we do to an aircraft to allow it to carry fuel as cargo. We've had a lot of fuel, like 4,000 liters with a small aircraft. So we brought this technology to Indonesia about 5 or 6 years ago to work on President Jokowi's BBM Satu hardware program. So we've been doing that for 5 years, supporting his program, flying into the mountains of Papua and Kalimantan, delivering fuel to the communities. So now we're looking to expand and serve other customers. And so we've set up our own company locally, and actually are getting our certification to be a local airline. And then we'll serve a range of customers, delivering initially BBM fuel to remote communities, the places where trucks can't reach easily. So we can fly in 4,000 meters at a time, make 2 or 3 trips a day, something like that. So bring in fuel that local communities need. And then once we've got the airline established, we'll look to add other business lines as well too. In Canada, where headquarters of one of our investors is. We also do passengers to remote locations and just general cargo. And then we also do resort business, where we have seaplanes. All the guests flying. We've got about 5 resorts, and all the guests flying the seaplanes.
Yeah, it's just we have more than 17,000 islands in Indonesia.
Yeah.
If we have to build airports in every island, there's some big jobs, right?
That's one of the benefits of seaplanes. You don't need much infrastructure. You need a dock like you need a dock for a boat, basically.
Right.
You need some regulations. That's it.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think it's in late 1970s. By that time, Minister of Research was Professor Habibie, who then became president in 1998. Now he built an aeroplane industry in Bandung, Nortanio. That was considered successful. But that was also a long-range aeroplane. And in countries like America, Europe, China, you have good roads everywhere. The infrastructure are good. So you need a long-range aeroplane. Yeah. And in Indonesia, actually with so many islands, do you think we need a long-range aeroplane, or also we need actually a short one, hop off, hop in, hop off, and if we can have a football ground to be the airport,
Yeah.
so the aeroplane shouldn't be landing with a long runway, but it's just like an airport, more like helicopter, but maybe can take 200, 300 passengers and bring also cargo. What do you think about that? Is there any technology on that one?
Well, I think the answer is you need both. You need sort of longer distance aircraft to get from Jakarta to
Papua.
Papua, for instance. Yeah, exactly. That's right, which has larger capacity. And then from there to get to the smaller destinations. I mean, a lot of the destinations we fly to, the runways are only 800 meters, 1,000 meters, something like that. So we need a fairly small aircraft to get in there. So I think the trick is to have both and have them well integrated. Yeah, and that's the thing. And we still use small aircraft in Canada because we don't have roads everywhere. It's kind of spread out. Like Indonesia, so there are locations that can only be reached by air and by small aircraft.
Yes.
Communities that we serve in Canada.
Yeah, I remember there was a disaster in Palu a few years ago.
Yeah.
And if we tried to help by bringing the long-range aeroplane, the airport was also closed.
And geography was one of the few that flew in. We brought fuel in for the
Okay.
So they flew in with our aircraft. They land on smaller airstrips.
So it's actually important for Indonesia to produce small aeroplane, right?
Yeah.
And for domestic market, this is very good and possibly also very attractive for investors to come, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities in the aviation business.
And we will need a lot of pilots, right?
Yeah.
We will need thousands of small aircrafts.
Yep.
Yeah. And maybe short runways, right?
Yeah, it depends on the location. Wherever
If there is sea, okay, you can use seaplane. But
Yeah.
if it is in the rural area where it's far away from the coast, then you need a short-range airstrip. Yeah.
Yeah, shorter runway. Airstrips are expensive to develop. So
That's right.
falling down, make them so long.
But
yeah,
there is technology, right? Of building a small aeroplane which landing in a football ground like helicopter.
sure. And there are they can land on very short runways. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, which possibly not feasible in big countries which have good roads, right?
Yeah, not as necessary. That's
Yeah, but they will be feasible in Indonesia because the demand here would be very high, won't it?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
this building runways is expensive.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little communities. So yeah.
Right. I hope this conversation will get the attention of either our authority or some investors who want to do this kind of business. Yeah, small aeroplane with technology that the aeroplane doesn't have to use an airstrip that can land in the football ground, right? Then
Yeah, I mean, I know we worked with the Director General for Civil Aviation, UCA, and they're quite interested in seaplanes. Like if we look at Maldives has a tourism industry.
Right.
And the Maldives there's one plane that comes through Canada, the Twin Otter, which is a seaplane. And in the Maldives alone has 100 Twin Otters servicing various resorts. Whereas Indonesia, I think, has one Twin Otter that services resorts and a couple others that do other things.
Yeah. Well, we just finished asphalting the airstrip at Tanjung Lesung.
Right, I heard
Yeah, 800 meters, beautiful now.
Nice.
It's ready to accept small aircraft to come. And if we can build more like this, it would be very helpful.
Yeah.
It costs us maybe about 10 billion rupiah. It's not that expensive actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Some opportunity cost, I guess, for the land, but still,
Yes, yeah.
that's what Indonesia need more of to increase the connectivity.
Correct, yeah. Okay, so it's very interesting to listen to your explanation. Do you want to add more something which you think it will be useful for investors or for also Indonesian economy or government to listen to your opinion, advice?
Yeah, well, I mentioned, that Indonesia needs to become more high profile, but I think at the same time, investors need to spend more time in Indonesia. I was in an investment summit in Singapore a couple of weeks ago, and people were excited about Indonesia, but they hadn't spent much time here. So I think investors do need to come here, get down on the ground, look around, and understand the opportunities for themselves. It takes more work, but certainly this market is becoming so big and so important that it's definitely
Maybe take a short course in Presiden University.
sure.
Meeting our lecturers, the businessmen in JABABEKA, on how to do business in Indonesia,
Exactly.
having local partners. Because market survey is very expensive, right? For 3 years you do your market survey, it can cost you millions of dollars. Right?
That's right.
Coming to our university, it would be very cheap, right? And you can also build up your network, right?
Good way to do it.
That's right. Thanks very much.